Good afternoon, scholars. Welcome to your last Thursday literature class. This is not your last literature class. You got a few more, but next week we'll only have work to do for a few of the days. We won't have work all week. So it's definitely your last Thursday class of the year. Um, I'm not going to spend too much time today going over the work from yesterday because just to be quite honest, um, most of the effort given throughout the grade was very, very, very poor, which is really disappointing because um, I didn't just throw this prompt at you. We actually had 3 days where we were slowly developing our answers and developing our thinking, and a lot of students were on board going up to the build up, and when it came time to actually write out our responses, people just quit, which shows a serious, serious, serious lack of focus and maturity, but not from these folks. Um, I'm really proud of you eight. There's also a number of you who got 70s that I'm not too angry at. I'm not angry at anybody, but there's a lot of students that got 70s that I'm glad you put in the effort. But the grit list is always for people who get 80s and above. And really, if you didn't get an 80 or above on this, it's because you didn't go to office hours when you could have, and you didn't um, listen to the feedback and apply the feedback to your first draft. So there's really not really any good excuses or reasons why people didn't get 80s. So shout out to Camila, Reina, Elvia, Jada, Mirage, Isabella, Israel, and Joao for not only your work on this assignment, but throughout the whole unit. I think because you guys worked so hard throughout the whole unit, you were able to finish really strong with some really convincing, strong opinions about why Reginald Rose wrote the play that we read. We're going to start to shift into um, some really engaging short stories that are going to. I can't wait to get your opinions on. I think they're going to elicit some reactions and some interest in students. And um, let's check out our first one. Our first short story is a short story. This is your assignment. It's a short story by a writer named Sherman Alexie. And Sherman Alexie wrote a book that we have in our library at school. When we get back, I highly recommend you guys read it now that you're in seventh grade. It's a bit more appropriate for older students. Not, I wouldn't have recommended to you as a sixth grader because there's a little bit of mature content in there, but it's good for like a late middle school or early high school read. It's like Diary of a Wimpy Kid for teenagers. But Sherman Alexie, he grew up on an Indian reservation in Washington State, and he is a lot of his writing deals with what it was like to. He grew up on the Indian reservation, but he left the reservation when he went to high school. He would leave the reservation every day to go to a high school um, that was a mostly white high school that he felt would give him a better chance at going to college and succeeding in life and stuff. But he really writes really interesting and thought provoking writings about what it's like to live in those two different worlds. Um, this reading is about high school, um, but it's not he's not a character in it necessarily, and it doesn't really hit on the Native American aspect of life. But this is just about two friends who um, who make some really bad choices together, but only one of them gets in trouble. And so it's a pretty short story, but I want to know the two friends are named Pete and John, and um, they do something bad together often. They do something they shouldn't be doing, and one of them has a change of heart and decides to stop. The other one does it just one more time and he gets caught. And so, what I want to know by the end of this story, as you're reading, is which character, Pete or John, do you think is the protagonist in the story? And which character, Pete or John, do you think is the antagonist in the story? So let's go over those two terms again, just before we get into the reading. You guys wrote about what it means to be an antagonist a lot when you discussed if you thought juror 3 or juror 10 was the main antagonist of the story. And I hit on protagonist quickly. The protagonist of 12 Angry Men was juror 8. And so what a protagonist is, look up here on the definition up here towards the top left. The protagonist is the advocate or champion of a cause or a goal in a story. The protagonist doesn't mean it's necessarily the main character. Usually in the books and movies we read, the protagonist is the main character, but that doesn't mean the protagonist doesn't always mean the main character. Okay? The protagonist is someone who's standing up for something or is fighting for something. Okay? Some examples of protagonists that you've read: Odysseus in the Odyssey, right? What was he standing up for? What was he fighting for? He was fighting to go back to his wife. He was fighting to return his crew safely home. Ponyboy and Johnny, like what were they fighting for? What did they want, right? They just wanted to enjoy themselves. They wanted to enjoy their youth. They wanted to enjoy the movies and the rodeo. They just wanted to live their life, right? Claudette Colvin, because these are nonfiction and fiction examples. What does Claudette Colvin stand up for? What was she fighting for? What was her cause or what was her goal? Yeah, she stood up against racial injustice when she refused to give up her bus seat. So the protagonist is someone in the story who's really standing up for something or is just has a goal or something that they want. The um, antagonist is the protagonist opponent in achieving that goal or that cause. So the antagonist is stopping them or trying to stop them from achieving their goal. So who's the antagonist in the Odyssey? That would be Poseidon, because Odysseus is trying to return home. Poseidon's trying to stop him. He's trying to use it. He throws storms at him. He throws different monsters at him. Who are Ponyboy and Johnny's antagonists, right? Ponyboy and Johnny Boy are just trying to live their life. Who's trying to stop them from doing that? The Socias. They harass them. They attack them wherever they go. And when Claudette Colvin was standing up for racial injustice, when she refused to give up her seat in the bus, who was her antagonist? The police. You know, a lot more than that. There's the lawmakers, but in this case, the police arrested her when she tried to stand up for that cause. So another way, a really simplified kind of little kid way of looking at protagonist and antagonist is the protagonist is the good guy and the antagonist is the bad guy. We can think of it in terms of that, although I want us to think a little bit more nuanced. And in this case, we're going to say the protagonist has something they're standing up for, and the antagonist is going against that. Okay? So, in this story, as you read, you need to think about who is the protagonist, who's standing up for something, and who's the antagonist, who's going against that. A simplified version: who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. Okay? Again, the protagonist is not always the main character in the story, but it can be. So here we go. This is going to be your exit ticket. I'm going to give you two options, and I'm just going to tell you flat out. I'm sorry to if I give this away, but I want to make sure you can do the assignment well. I'm giving you two options here. There's Pete and there's John. That bad thing that they're doing that they shouldn't do, they're stealing in this story. They're stealing sodas from a neighborhood family little quick stop kind of thing. John gets caught, Pete doesn't. So here's the question I want you need to keep in mind the whole time you read, and you're going to answer it at the end of the reading. Remember, John gets caught, he gets in lots of trouble. Pete does not get caught. He doesn't get in any trouble. So I want this this is what you're going to respond to by the end of the reading. You got two options. I'm giving you the assertion. You're going to pick which assertion you agree with, and you're going to prove that assertion with really well-selected evidence and really convincing analysis. So option 1, Pete is the protagonist. He demonstrates integrity. So integrity is what he's standing up for, his cause. He demonstrates integrity when he tells John it's wrong to steal. John is the antagonist because he does it anyway. Option B is flipped. John is the protagonist. He demonstrates loyalty by taking the fall for stealing. And not telling on Pete, even though he demonstrates loyalty by taking the fall for stealing and not telling on Pete. Period. Sorry, guys. Even though Pete joined him all but one time. Pete is the antagonist because he allows his friend to take all the blame and punishment. Don't make up your mind right now because you haven't read the story. But keep those two in mind. Who's the protagonist? Who's the antagonist? Are you going to say Pete's the good guy and John's the bad guy? Are you going to say John's the good guy and Pete's the bad guy? Okay? Then you're going to prove it here. Like I said, these are the assertions you're going to use. You need to bring it home with well-selected evidence and convincing analysis. You have 2 multiple choice questions on the sides. You just need to highlight your answer when you get to them. My feedback for the day is, in order to write really good analysis, convincing analysis, discuss what could have happened in the play, in the story, if the characters had made different decisions, right? So if you're trying to show that Pete did the right thing and John did the wrong thing, talk about what John could have done differently in order to not have been the bad guy. If you say the opposite, that John's the good guy and Pete's the bad guy, okay, so what could Pete have done differently to be the protagonist and not the antagonist? So discuss what could have happened but didn't, because that's going to show your thinking, because you're explaining things that didn't actually happen in the story. And analysis is when our thinking isn't just talking about what happened in the story, it's going beyond it and outside of it. All right. So doing this will help you write convincing analysis. I can't wait to see the battle, the clash of opinions. There's no office hours today because teachers are making lots of phone calls to parents about summer school and about your grades. A quick hit on the students who made the grit list, guys. All of you are going to get, no students' grades are going to drop from what happened on Vista Virtual because some things are out of your control. But the students who really worked hard on this assignment and throughout the unit, your grades are going to get boosted. We're going to give you extra credit for the work that you've done throughout this Vista Virtual. All right. So if your name is not on this list, you're probably not going to get a boost because your effort wasn't there. But we'll go by case basis. No one's grade is going to get hurt from what they did or didn't do on Vista Virtual, but students who worked really hard, your grade and your report card is going to get helped. All right. So let's do our best on this. It's not too late to boost your grade on your report card from what it was in Q3 if you give some strong effort these last couple lessons. All right. I'll see you guys tomorrow.